to look at is the process I call smoothing. And this is rather different from what we were looking at before, because this involves strong vowels. However, it does feed into compression, which is the link with the rest of this lecture. How do we pronounce the word spelled F-I-R-E? Well, if you listen to me, you probably hear me say this fire. Don't stand by the fire. How do we pronounce the word spelled P-O-W-E-R? Power. We need a bit more power. This is a very powerful machine. Firepower. Now, although that's the way I normally say them, there is another sense in which I know that underlyingly these are fire and power. So again, we've got this business of a difference between what we actually say on the surface and what we perhaps know about these words underneath. Because we have a process, an optional process, which enables us to change them. So we start out as fire, fire, and power. And we can go through various intermediate reductions. We can say far, far, and far, and ultimately far. And I analyse this as consisting first of all of a process called smoothing and then of compression. Now smoothing says you take a diphthong, as for example I, and you lose the second element of the diphthong. So we have I and we lose the I bit. So instead of fire, we say far, far. Instead of our, we say our. Fire becomes far. Power becomes power. In terms of a vowel chart, this means just taking the short route. If we've got instead of going we go just taking a shortcut for the tongue, not bothering to make so big an excursion. So there's a simple phonetic explanation in terms of least effort. Aya becomes our becomes our. But the further complication is that we can then reduce the number of syllables, because now we've got two syllables, we can then compress them into a single syllable, giving fa as one syllable. Well, historically it was one syllable, of course, just as much as a word like pipe. This was historically fire. So it's sort of gone through a backwards and forwards process. It can now count either as one syllable or as two syllables. We don't mind. How is this relevant to the learner of English as a foreign language? Well, mainly I think from the point of view of recognition. Maybe if you're doing English as an international language, as Dr. Jenkins wants, then you can just ignore this process, because it's generally speaking not used by those who don't speak English natively. But the problem is that those of us who do speak English natively, do often do this. And you're going to have a problem of comprehension if you are not able to deconstruct it. Where is University College? In Gar Street. Well, Gar Street. Gar. You have to be able to reconstruct Gower. Gower Street. But we call it Gar Street. Which faculty are you in? The Faculty of Science. Science. You've got to be able to reconstruct science. Well, I think that's not too difficult in a word like science, but it can cause problems, particularly with proper names. There was a fancy dress party, and the group agreed together, what should we dress up as? Let's all dress up as pirates. Unfortunately, there was a Swede among them, and the Swede from Sweden misunderstood pirate, and heard parrot. And so he came in a quite different costume. Parrot, that is pirate, or pirate, compared with parrot. So, again, that's the kind of misunderstanding that could happen if you don't know about this. His name's Hard. There's Hard. If somebody's called Brown, hello Brown. Brown. I hope you can write that name down correctly. Brown. This happens, of course, in London speech as well. I'm not a Londoner, I come from the north of England, but when I first came to live in London, I had to get adjusted to London speech, and I felt I had really arrived when I asked someone his name, and he told me his name was Zhao. And I was able to write it down correctly. Zhao. That is Dale. Dale. London, all turns as we know it to O. London, A, diphthong shifts to I. Smoothing gives us down, which is what he said. So it's all logical, it's just a matter of undoing these things, but you have to know about it in order to undo it. Last little question is to ask, does English have triphthongs? Some books say yes. I don't believe it. I don't believe we do have triphthongs because, in my view, if you have everything present in a word like fire, then really you have to say just two syllables, fire. If you want to make it one syllable, which we can, then you have to smooth it, fire, because it's too much to get fire all into one syllable. So, it's, a thing we can argue about and debate, but it seems to me that we don't need to recognize any set of triphthongs in English. All we have is sequences of diphthong plus something else, which potentially can be smoothed out phonetically and compressed into something similar.